And Trevor is going to be my buddy who is going to be available to help troubleshoot any technical difficulties you might have, and who will also be moderating any questions we may get in the chat. Before we begin, I need to let you know some ground rules that we have set up for today's program. Virtual attendees will be muted and have their video blocked. During the program, you will only see my screen. At the top of your screen, you can find an exit full screen option if you need to get to other things on your computer. You are welcome to ask questions or request that I repeat information at any time during today's program. You can either use the chat or Q&A features available in Zoom, and you should see those icons at the bottom of your screen. We will repeat all questions that we receive so that everyone has the context of that question before we move on. A recording of this program will also be available in a few days on our YouTube channel. As a final note, as we get started today, I need to remind you that I am not a subject matter expert. The information that we are sharing today is designed to be an overview and to help you get started with Unreal Engine 5. At the end of the class, we will share some additional resources and classes to allow you to learn even more than what is shared today. So the goal for today's class is to explore using Unreal Engine 5. We'll first explain what Unreal Engine is, and then outline some terminology. Afterwards, we will do a short demonstration. So, you're here for Unreal Engine Basics, but what is it really? Unreal Engine 5 is a game engine, which is a software used for making video games. There are lots of different game engines available, each with different strengths. Unreal Engine is a great tool for making 3D games or games that involve video game physics. That said, it is also versatile, so it can be used to make almost any type of game. While it is possible to make a game without using a game engine, using software like Unreal Engine makes the process easier by taking care of some of the work that the game designer would have to do. For example, there's portability, which is the ability to port or make a version for platforms other than the one it is developed on. So a game made on a Windows computer without a game engine can require a lot of work to run on an Apple computer, a gaming console, or a smartphone, any other kind of device. Unreal has export functions that make it possible to make the same game playable on all of those platforms with a few button presses after you've otherwise finished your game. Unreal Engine also has visualization and testing. Unreal lets you see what the game looks like as it is made. Without a game engine, the game designer would need to work with lines of code, wait for the code to compile, which actually takes longer the bigger the game is, and larger games can take hours to compile, and actually run the game each time that they wanted to see how a change looked and make sure that gameplay changes work how you expect them to. So with
We
portability,
pardon
hmm,
me. We got our first question.
okay.
The first question is, does it cost money to use Unreal Engine?
No, that is a great question. Unreal Engine is completely free, uh, as long as you are using it for personal use. For commercial use, it is also free to an extent. Trevor, do you remember the number off the top of your head? There's like an upper limit to how much money you can make off of Unreal Engine, and I don't remember that exact number.
I do not either, but I do know that it's posted on their website.
Yes. Speaking of their website, Trevor, could you drop the link for downloading Unreal Engine into the chat?
Sure.
Thank you. Um, so long story short, Unreal Engine, great for many reasons, including the fact that it is free. So software requirements. You need Windows 10 or Mac OS 12.5 or more recent. You need at least 30 gigabytes of storage. Unreal Engine takes a lot of storage, and you need at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. These are the very minimum requirements. If you have more, then it is very much better to run the engine. While the actual engine will take up approximately 30 gigabytes, there are many extras, for example, levels, asset packs, etc., that can take up even more space if you choose to install them as well. The initial download may require more space than that 30 gigabyte number as well. Levels and games that you make will take up storage space as well, so be sure to plan ahead with an external hard drive or other storage options if needed. Um, it should be noted that we have Unreal Engine 5 installed at the Digital Creation Spaces, which are available at the Harrington, Haggard, and Parr libraries. So you can try the software out or work on projects there as well. If you need to edit or create your own 3D models, then a 3D modeling software like Maya, Blender, or Tinkercad will be needed as well, though Unreal does have several options for finding pre-made models, which we will discuss later. You do not have to code when using Unreal Engine. When we demonstrate some basics of Unreal Engine later, we will be using Blueprints, which is Unreal's visual coding script. So we will not be using any other software. However, if you want to code, you will need your code editing software of choice. Unreal Engine is primarily used and created to make video games. It is a very popular choice, especially for companies that create AAA games, which are games with very large budgets and teams and often want to look realistic. Unreal Engine 5 can also be used to create other things as well. And these include animation, CGI, which are visual effects related to animation but used over existing live action footage. And there's also different industry uses, such as mocking up items for manufacturing or even simulating a building for architects. We are going to briefly go over some key vocabulary used when working with Unreal Engine. First, we've got asset. These are all of the different objects or media you can upload or manipulate in your project. These can be imported from outside sources, or it can sometimes be built within Unreal Engine. For example, this includes 3D models, music files, video files, and so on. Next vocabulary word we have is levels. Sometimes these are referred to as maps. A level is a gameplay area that defines what a player can see and interact with. This includes environments, assets, other characters, geometry, pawns, and actors all together. Multiple levels can be loaded into the world to create a seamless experience when the game is actually running, but in Unreal Engine, games are saved level by level. Our final vocabulary word is object, and these are instances of assets. One copy of an asset uh, in a level. You can have multiple copies of the same asset in the level, and each copy is an object. So, for example, if we have cubes, the cube itself would be an asset, but each copy of that cube is an object. So we can make changes to each object without changing the original asset. Unreal Engine also refers to objects as actors. Okay, and now it is time for our demonstration. Mhm. So, um, please note that this is intended to be a general overview of how to use Unreal Engine and not a full tutorial for a game. And after the demo, we will provide more additional learning resources available online, as well as specific resources available through the library. Unreal Engine is a software accessed for the first time through the Epic Games launcher. To get started, make sure that you first have the Epic Games launcher downloaded onto your computer. You will then need to sign into your Epic Games account, which you can make for free, and download the Unreal Engine 5 application from the menu that will be on the left-hand side of the screen. So I've already downloaded it. just a note, it can take a long time to download Unreal Engine 5, depending on your internet speed. A recording of this program will be available on the library YouTube channel if you are wanting to follow along later. After Unreal is installed, you can find the large yellow rectangle on the top right of your screen. Um, so sometimes there will be an update needed, and you can click Update, and otherwise it will say Launch, and we can open the software. Um, as a note, when you install, there is also an option to make a desktop shortcut to that specific version of Unreal Engine that you choose. Double-clicking on that shortcut will also launch the software. So there's my shortcut, and actually, I've already opened it. Mm. So, Unreal Engine can take a while to load onto the computer, which is why I had it preloaded. Um, and the first thing that we will want to do is we will actually want to create a new project. So you can see we have recent projects, we have games that we can create, different suggested projects. We are going to work within games specifically. We are going to want to make sure that we have third person selected. Um, and then we are going to make sure that we have blueprint as opposed to C++ selected. And then, yeah, okay, create. Oh, it's taking a second. It's compiling, initializing, loading. And when it opens, you should see a screen somewhat similar to this. This is a default view of the Unreal Engine, and there are some windows that are automatically available, and these and the default menus contain most of the commands you will need to make a game. So there is the preview window, which is this large rectangular square in which we see the game itself. It shows you what the game currently looks like. At the top, it also has some play, pause, and stop buttons so that you can test a game as you add things. But if the play button is active, um, any changes you make will not save. So make sure you make changes to the game when the game isn't running. So when this play button is not pressed. We also have the outliner. This outliner is a window right here. Um, and this workspace lists all objects in the game level. There can be multiple copies of the same asset, and the outliner lets you pick out different copies, change their name, or other properties independently without changing the actual asset itself. You can also group objects together so you can move or edit them at the same time. So you can see here we've got some groups already in the shape of folders, and um, we have all of these instances of cubes, which are objects. Finally, we have details, which is below the outliner on the right. The details window is blank when nothing is selected, but when we actually click on an object, you'll see both in the preview window that the object was highlighted, so we can see it's yellow, and then also we can see that the details loaded and has a bit of a scroll wheel, so we can change multiple things about the actual object itself. Depending on what you have selected, different options will be available. But as an example, if it is a visual element, scaling can happen here to make sure that objects are precisely the size that you want. There is, however, a way to scale without that, and examples will be shown in just a minute. Oh, I almost forgot about our content drawer, which is down here on the bottom, which is only displayed when it is selected. So it is a button that you push and then pops out. Um, This workspace lists all assets in the game, not just the level. This is also where you switch between levels if you have more than one. By going into the levels folder, um, which I do not have. A very similar window can be opened by going to the Add Asset icon and then clicking on Content Browser, which we have all of these different content browsers. So both of those ways let you see and organize objects and assets in the project itself. So we have this wonderful view. What do we do with it? Uh, we're going to talk a little bit about camera controls. Once your new project is loaded, you can look around the viewing space provided. You can either left click or right click, and both will do the same thing. They will allow you to pan um, and kind of move back and forth to actually move within the space. You're either going to select your scroll wheel button and kind of use that as a middle mouse button so that you can kind of uh, move within the preview window. Or you can also do Alt right click if you do not have a scroll wheel. And you can zoom in and out by using the scroll wheel on your mouse. So we can zoom in by scrolling up or zoom out by scrolling down. In the preview window, you will notice a few different icons in the top right corner of the preview window. Um, sorry, top left. Uh, the first option, which looks like a mouse, is just your select object button, and it allows you to select objects as you see them and click on them on the preview window. And you can see as I clicked around, the details shifted to uh, change to what my current object was selected. You can also see that there's a yellow outline around the objects that are selected. The next icon in the sequence has vertical and horizontal arrows. And when this is selected, it allows you to move the object within the level. So, for example, this ramp, we have these three different arrows that allow us to move within three-dimensional space, so to speak. So if I clicked on this blue arrow, I could click and drag it up or down, depending on what I wanted to do. And same for the other arrows. The green arrow will allow us to go side to side, and the red arrow will allow us to move back and forth. Trying to get this as close as possible. Okay. Um, we can also click and drag from the white center and try to move it independently of the arrows itself. Um, this allows for a little bit more free-form moving. I prefer the arrows myself, but you can definitely shift things around using the white center in the middle of the arrows. The next icon um, is an arrow rotating in a circle. And when selected, this tool will allow you to turn any item you have on the X, Y, or Z axes. Um, so we can, again, click and drag to rotate oop, along the green, along the red, or the blue. The final icon, which looks like a rectangle with a square inside of it, will allow you to scale the selected object to make it either bigger or smaller. You can use the blue again to scale it along an independent axis. Or I believe we can uh, click that white to scale the entire thing bigger or smaller. And that was just me clicking and dragging either to the right to make it bigger or to the left to make it smaller. And in the outliner, um, for the object, you will see I actually didn't quite get all of this right. We had our rotation set to be 0, 0, and I'm pretty sure that was negative 270, and now it's negative 269.99999. But I would be able to change this to negative 270 just by typing it in, and that should get my rotation just exactly perfect. You can also see that we have different locations and scales. So if you knew the exact location that you wanted your item to be on in the game, you could enter that there. Okay. So all of this is fine and dandy, but how do we actually add stuff to this? Well, we can insert and import assets. So now that we know how to move objects around, it's time to add some new items to the template. In the top left corner of the workspace, you'll see that there's this cube with a plus icon over it. And this can allow us to add new objects or actors into the workspace. So once we click on this
Hi,
icon,
Anna.
yeah,
Well, we got another question.
mhm.
I believe it's something we're probably about to cover a little bit, but it's how are engines like Blender used with Unreal Engine?
Ooh, okay. So Unreal Engine itself has different basic things that you can import into it. So it has shapes like cubes, spheres, cylinders, cones, so on. It itself is not the best at modeling three-dimensional objects, though. So I would say that if you wanted a specific model, then you would want to first model it in Blender, which has a lot more 3D modeling options, and then import it into Unreal Engine. Um, yeah, would you say that's correct, Trevor?
Yes, that is very correct. I think the only other thing I could add too is you can also do that with animations. So you could have like a
Mm,
character waving and you can create that in Blender and then import that animation into this game as well, or the engine as well.
great point. Thank you. Um, okay. Back to importing. I got a little ahead of myself, but once we click on this icon, it gives us several different types of objects to add. So we have import content, Quixel Bridge and Fab, which are under get content, which allows us to either use these pre-existing libraries or our own files to import content. But then there's also just the basics that Unreal Engine has. So um, we are going to look at shapes. There they are. And we've got cubes, spheres, cylinders, cones, planes. They all work pretty similarly, so I'm just going to use a cube as an example. So if we insert a cube, we can move the cube around using the controls that we had talked about a little bit earlier. So holding that white, making sure that it moves across my screen. Maybe I want it mm, hovering above this platform here. Perfect. Um, the cube will float wherever we leave it. By default, physics does not automatically affect the cube. The cube is fixed or static where it is placed in the level. It will not move um, while the game is running. And this is great for things like making walls or floors. Really, really useful for those kinds of objects. Um, and if we test the game here, actually, play this level. Where's my cube? There it is. You can see it is floating and not doing much. It's not being affected by gravity or anything like that. So I'm going to hit my escape button now to pause the game. And by selecting it, I can now see in the details different options to affect this cube. So in the outliner, we can see that the cube is a static mesh right now. Um, this means that the shape will not move or change ever. There's also stationary, which is a similar setting. So right now we've got static. We can also set it to be stationary. Um, and uh, shapes that are stationary will also not move, but can be changed in other ways during gameplay. If you want code to be able to move the blocks, but you don't want the player to be able to move them, you can change their mobility in the details section to stationary. If you want the player to be able to move the object just by running into it, you can change it to movable right there. And then we can also simulate physics, this little checkbox right here under physics. Checking the physics box will also automatically change the shape to movable because it cannot be static and also affected by physics. So if we place a cube in the air and set it to movable, um, so let's do that. Cube. Oh, let's move that up. Maybe about there. So we've got our two cubes. Um, one I'm going to set to be movable without simulating physics, and the other is going to have physics simulated on it. And we can see what the difference between those is going to be when we hit play. Mm, So you can see that the one cube that I had simulated physics on fell to the ground, whereas the one that did not is still floating in the air. Okay. So of course, once the game is paused, we can see that the cube again starts by floating in the air as well. Mm, in shapes, uh, there's also planes, which are a little bit different from shapes. Planes are perfectly flat and are only visible from one direction. And you could use them for things like moving platforms, but it's a little weird to not be able to see the platform from the bottom. Uh, Usually, planes are best used for the absolute floor of the level and border walls. These are only seen from the proper direction anyway. You can also apply physics to planes, but if you do, the plane would fall and then be on the floor. And if anybody actually steps on the plane, then it would probably fall through the floor. It tends to glitch out a little bit. So planes are a little bit complicated, but are great for floors and walls. So far, when we look at these cubes, whoop, they are pretty boring. They are just plain white, um, and there's not a whole lot going on to them right now. So if we wanted to change the look of the box, we can use materials. So I'm going to have it selected one more time so that my details is open properly. And if we scroll down to materials, um, you'll see that there's a, a drop-down menu here where you can select different materials themselves. Um, materials uh, are basically textures or colors that can be applied to any 3D model in the game. And you can look at the ones that are currently available by opening the content drawer on the bottom left of the screen. Um, right now, we do not have any materials beyond the basic starter ones, unfortunately. So I could try to do something a little bit cooler, but it's still very basic. You can get materials by going over into Fab, and that will launch um, kind of Unreal Engine's, I'd say, marketplace, where you can look specifically at different materials and textures, and you can sort by filter and make sure that I would want price lowest first, the free ones. And you can see that there's a number of different textures that are available for free for you to download. Um, so for example, if I wanted this one, which is already saved in my library, um, I would be able to click on it and then say add to project, add to project. It's downloading right over here. Lovely. But now when I click on materials, it should have loaded more of my lovely little materials. So, we can add lots of different materials to any of the models in the level, and we could change as many as we wanted. However, we also need to talk about lighting because it doesn't matter how nice the level looks if there isn't any light. All levels must have some lighting element, otherwise your game will be pitch dark. And there are several types of lighting, and they all have slightly different uses. Um, there are a few options under Insert uh, Content uh, in the Lights menu. So we've got directional light. Um, on the third person template by default, there is already a directional light. So we can see that. Hmm, Actually trying to find it. There it is. Beautiful. Uh, this right here is our directional light. And if we click these different options, you can see that there's little arrows pointing from them. Uh, so if we wanted to, we could move our directional light, or we could rotate our directional light as well. Um, and then you can see that depending on how far we rotate our directional light, we might start getting some effects that almost look like a sunset. Um, but I wouldn't go too far because otherwise your sun is underneath your level and it's a little hard to see what's actually on your level. Uh, with directional light, you really only need one. So if you accidentally delete it, or if you start a level completely from scratch, you may want to add one. The directional light simulates the sun or general ambient lighting. Um, the light it casts affects the whole level the same way. So moving it, uh, like we did earlier, doesn't do a whole lot. There we go. However, rotating it does allow the shadows to change on the level, as we saw earlier. So if you wanted something a little bit moodier, then you might want to add some uh, angle to the directional light. In the details area, you can change the light color um, and adjust also the temperature. Um, so it can be either very cool or very warm. Ooh, very, very warm. You can also change the brightness of it as well. The intensity right there. Ooh, a little too bright. I think I'm going to change that again to just 3 lux. There we go. A little bit better. Also under lights, let's actually get to a nice shaded area. Beautiful. We have different options available for lights as well. We also have the point light. The point light radiates light out from an origin point. If I pick, uh, it generates a point light object, which can be moved the same way that the shapes were. The point light has a limited but adjustable range and illuminates a specific spot. So I'm going to move this light even further into the shadows, and you can see that it's actually changing the shadows over here to cast upwards. Mm, So we can see that the point light is affecting the space around it. And if we put it next to a block, you can see that it affects all directions. Um, so even if the directional light has is still affecting the space, or if you accidentally delete the directional light, the point light will kind of take over as the main light of the level. Um, you can also change the light color. So let's make it blue maybe. Or actually, no, let's make it red. Um, we can change the attenuation radius, which is how far that point light goes out. So you can see if we make it smaller, the light really only falls within the circular bounds. We can also change the intensity and make it even brighter. Probably make the attenuation radius a little bit brighter as well. And other effects in the details window as well. We also have spotlight under lights, which works somewhat similarly. Mhm. Move up, move out. Mm. So trying to move this a little bit further away. There we go. The spotlight you can see looks a little bit more directional because it is. It is similar to the point light, but it is restricted. Like someone stuck a cone over the point light. Um, if we rotate it though, we can see that it can create some dynamic lighting either on the walls or other parts of the level. And finally, there is rect light um, under our lights. Ooh. Mm, let's move our rect light. Move that rect light. Um, the rect light is especially good if you're trying to make something look like a screen. Um, the rect light is kind of like a light attached to a plane, like light from a TV monitor, where there's a flat surface behind it that's blocking it from going backwards. Uh, so if I move this along this wall, you can see that the rec light uh, is not actually shining on the wall behind it, but it is shining on the floor in front of the wall itself. And to make it look even more like a TV screen, we can adjust that lighting to be a little bit bluer. Okay. Every game project is going to have different needs in terms of lighting. You can use any number and combination of lights to change how the player sees the level. For example, you can have a directional light for outside of a building, but lots of point lights inside of the building so that the players can see where they're going. Or there could be absolutely no directional light, but lots of spotlights that let the players see only very specific parts of where their character is going. You can get very, very creative with these. Mm, we briefly touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'm going to briefly touch on it again. Quixel Bridge, which loaded in my other screen, allows you to download some 3D assets, surfaces, and other things as well. So you can import these into your project the same way that we did with Fab. A little bit differently, but it gets the point across. Um, so we are going to move right on and talk about what are blueprints. Um, Blueprints are the visual scripting system for Unreal Engine 5. Blueprints allow things in the game to interact with each other and cause things to happen based on player input or other factors. Unreal works using the program language C++, and games can be coded using that language. But because the blueprint system is visual, you can connect different components visually instead of writing lines of code that do the same thing. There is a lot that you can do with blueprints, but we will just look at some basics here. Um, so to look at an example of a blueprint, we are going to actually look at the player. So I'm going to open my content drawer, I believe third person, blueprints, and I'm going to open the player that um, has triggered. Um, there is a lot going on here. I am using my scroll wheel to zoom out, and you can see some of the actual blueprints themselves in the event graph specifically. But you'll see that there's also different tabs here as well. There's our viewport, which allows us to see what the character actually looks like. Um, there's also the construction script. There's move, aim, and then the event graph as well. The event graph is just one of the tabs within the blueprint window, and it shows all of the instructions that tell the blueprint what to do. These are depicted in the boxes that are on the screen. Each big gray box is called an event, so you can see the pieces involved in movement, interaction, and more. These contain all the things that the blueprint does while in the game. There's also this wonderful compile button, which checks for mistakes in the event that a portion of the blueprint is not working properly. So if something can't compile, then the blueprint won't work at all before it's fixed. If you leave a blueprint broken, it can cause issues when the game runs and can crash the game. So hitting compile before you save is a good check to make sure that the code the blueprint represents is at least understandable by the computer. Uh, as a note, it is worth mentioning that just because something compiles doesn't mean that it will do what you are trying to do. Um, let's look at the viewport, um, or the construction script rather. The events in this tab are code that happens before the game starts. So some blueprints need to have something like a base value setup, and that doesn't need to happen all the time, just when the game starts. The construction instruction lets this code run just that one time and then it's set up. So the player blueprint doesn't have any code that needs to run once it spawns, so there really is nothing on this tab. On the left below the components tab, there's the My Blueprint tab, and this allows you to see all of the parts of the blueprint, including pulling the event graph back up if you close the window. Um, to show you one thing that you can change in this blueprint, that's very simple to change, I am going to open the details of our character and hmm, let's play around with the physics a little bit. Um, so hmm, we've got enable gravity already checked. I'm looking for ways that we can change the speed and change the actual acceleration. Um, if anything comes from this, I hope that you see there are a lot of menus within menus in Unreal Engine. Um, it's a little intimidating as a beginner, but I hope that this tutorial allows you to at least feel comfortable enough to play around, if nothing else. Well, let's. Hmm, okay. I'm going to compile, make sure that I didn't break anything too terribly. Looks like we've still got the green check mark. I'm going to hit this floppy save icon to save my blueprint as it is, and then I'm going to close. Um, and there is something that we have not been doing because it's just been kind of running in the background. We have not been saving. So this floppy disk icon saves the current level to the disk. Um, and you should save frequently to make sure that you don't lose progress if the program runs into a problem. You can save individual files as well as the whole project at once. So, um, alternatively, if you've opened up an asset in the content drawer and made changes to that asset, then you can also save the asset individually while its menu is pulled up. Um, However, if you are only saving one thing at a time, it's possible to change something and forget to save it. So Unreal Engine has a save all function under the file menu, and this will make sure that all changes are saved. Once the game is finished, it can be exported. So the settings for the export can be set up under the platforms drop-down at the top of the viewing window. Once you've set it up and decided to export, you can see we've got different platforms available to us. You need to be prepared to wait. The larger the game, the longer it takes. But once it's done, you will have an executable file that is your game. Okay, that concludes our demonstration. Um, but it does not conclude our program. So, does anybody have any final questions? Okay. You can start typing them out. But for additional resources on Unreal Engine 5, we highly recommend Udemy, LinkedIn Learning. Um, these are available for free with your Plano library card. Um, if you wanted to learn more about 3D modeling, then uh, you can use Blender, which is also available on Udemy and LinkedIn Learning for more tutorials. Or you can use Tinkercad, Maya, anything really. Maya, however, does cost money. Maya Autodesk is free for student and educators, but you'll need to verify your status as one of those to use Maya for free. There is also a free trial of Maya. Um, in case you haven't been in one of our programs before, I'll quickly show you a run through on how to access those databases, Udemy and LinkedIn Learning. You'll go to planolibrary.org, which Trevor should be dropping the link in the chat right now. It'll redirect you to our plano.gov page, but you'll click this Research and Learn button. And under All Databases, you should be able to click on Career, and then Access Now for LinkedIn Learning or Access Now for Udemy. Both are wonderful resources. I'm going to just show one for LinkedIn Learning. Uh, and once you're in, you'll see that there are a number of videos available, and these are video courses that you can follow along. There's a great search function that allows you to search for different things. It's not limited to Unreal and Blender. You can use Microsoft, Adobe. You can learn how to play electric bass, I recently found out. Um, anything that you would want to learn, you can probably find it on LinkedIn Learning or Udemy. And both are really, really great resources. Um, are there any final questions before we wrap up? Okay. Uh, Thank you so much for attending our online program. We hope that you have learned enough to be dangerous and learned enough to really whet your appetite and keep learning. We will hopefully see you at the library soon.